I'm Jeffrey Shaw, host of the Self-Employed Life podcast, author of Lingo and the Self-Employed Life. And today on Ever Forward, we talk about living life forward and the practicalities of being a small and self-employed business owner.
3, 2, 1.
I'm joined by Jeffrey Shaw, who is someone that no doubt I probably wish and could have valued from years and years ago when I was transitioning out of my 9 to 5 and just exploring the whole side hustle passion project and going full-blown entrepreneur shortly after that. He's quite literally written the book on it, and he is here to just help you listening, watching right now to make a decision, to figure out, to know really that this is what I want to do, and to know that there is life on the other side of self-employment, and there's somebody and some bodies that have done it before and can, get me ready to join the other side of the fence, so to speak. So Jeffrey, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Chase. I'm glad to be here with you.
I'm so glad you have kind of devoted your work now and all of your content to helping others with this really unique transitional piece. And that is, how do I start my own business? What is it like on the other side? Is it everything that it's cracked up to be? Is it as scary as I hear? What is the first thing that comes to mind when you are getting ready to talk to somebody who wants to step into the self-employed life? What is the first thing that you honestly hope that they hear first?
Yeah. It's, I love that you're asking it that way, because when I wrote the book, honestly, I wrote the book for existing self-employed business owners. That was that's what I care about. It's all I've ever known. But I started the book at the end of 2019. All right. So I was well into the book when the pandemic hit. And, of course, then as I'm writing it, I became very concerned about the people who were losing the millions of people that were losing their jobs, and realizing that every time there's been an increase in unemployment, there's an increase in self-employment. So then I was actually thrilled. Like, I felt like, okay, my timing is really good here. This book is going to serve a different audience, people that really need this content because they need to figure out how to get back on their feet really quick. But I'll tell you what, to answer your question, once the book was out, what surprised me is I started then thinking about, as I was just paying attention to the way all of us were and have been reevaluating our lives, then I started thinking about people like yourself, people that are in the corporate world, and wondering how many of them are miserable, because hey, employment engagement is like at an all-time low. I've been around in business long enough to know that, like, during the Great Recession, when again millions of people were losing their jobs, there was a study, like some 80% of people who lost their job didn't like the job they lost anyway, right? So
what are you sad about? I mean,
exactly.
Other than
But it's just such a big life.
Yeah.
It's such a big life change. But specifically, what I love to hear from people when they reach out, either they've lost their job or they're planning ahead, which is ideal. They're looking 6 months to a year down the road. You gave it like what, 90 days or something?
It was supposed to be 6 months. I got a little aggressive.
Yeah,
it was
that's
90
not
days.
normal.
Yeah.
If someone's going to plan it, it's usually 6 months to a year. But what I love to hear, honestly, when they reach out, is that they have no idea what their next step is. Like, I think there's people, what holds people in place, what holds people into probably a job that makes them miserable, is health insurance, which is just awful. Like, that's a terrible reason to, I get it, right? But man, we need to solve that problem. Like, it shouldn't be so hard and costly to get health insurance. If people are sacrificing happiness for health insurance, we have to change that.
You're sacrificing your health for the thing that you think you're keeping, right?
Isn't that the craziest thing, right? But aside from that, I think one of the things that hangs people up is they're too worried that they have to have it all figured out. And honestly, as a coach, having coached so many people through this transition, just reach out for support and let someone like myself know that I have no idea what my next step is, because that's what a good coach is able to do. They're able to find in you what you can't see in yourself. Right. What I look for is what I call the intersection between meaning and marketability. Like, at this next stage of your life, you want to create meaning. You want to do more purposeful work. and it has to be marketable. I'm going to be able to see that from an outside perspective much better than you can see in yourself. So I think the best position to be in, as scary as it is to be open and vulnerable and not know. Because too often, what can hang us up is thinking we have to have all the pieces in place. And you know what?
Yeah.
You can try, but those pieces can get thrown and scattered about the floor in no time flat, as we know.
So true. And quite literally, as you were just describing that process there, this analogy popped to my head of when we're, in the job market, the 9 to 5 corporate world, and let's say we know we want to get out of what we're in. What do? We get a resume ready. We look at Indeed, we look at all the websites, we look at all of the listings for possibilities, and we just try to match the one that looks the best on surface and also align our skill sets with what it's demanding. And, hopefully we can get some growth in there as well. But there is no real process for that when we're doing that with ourselves.
Yeah.
So how can you kind of walk someone through of taking the skill sets they have, taking that resume, but instead of just taking that and putting it out into the ether and trying to just align the best fit and hope that it sticks and hope that it works out better than the last one, how can we kind of create this listing for ourselves so that we can also create meaning along the way? Because it's very rare when we get to create the job and create it for ourselves instead of just finding one that we hope that works out.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Chase, honestly, I think all of life is lived backwards.
Yeah. Okay.
It really,
Well
I'll give you a
said.
specific I'll give you a specific example. I've been saying this for years, that businesses are built backwards, right? The way the typical business is built, somebody has an idea, they have a logo created and business cards printed, and then they run around for years trying to fit people into the box they built, right? The right way to build a business is to first get clear on what you bring to the table, who you're meant to serve, and then to build a business for them. Build a business they recognize from afar. They recognize your brand messaging. They recognize the design, that it fits them, right? So then I'll tell you, the business from that point is easy. So similarly, like I said, I think all of life is built backwards. That's how business is built backwards. But likewise, employers do it backwards too. I speak a lot in HR. And this is the point I make when I speak at HR events. Companies are also building their businesses backwards when it comes to recruiting, because they recruit whoever they think can fit, and then they try to change them once they get into the job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you have an engagement problem with your employees, like, how about taking more care about who you're hiring in the first place, that they're aligned with the values of the company? And how about keeping that alignment so it's a solid relationship? Same thing as an individual. Instead of building the resume, trying to figure out where you fit, do the inner work to define what you bring to the table. What are the skill sets that you have? What's your story? Like, what's been a part of your life? What's one of the questions I love to ask my coaching clients is, what drives you crazy? Because there's a really good chance what drives you crazy in life is what you would love to do to solve that problem.
That's the problem meant for you to solve. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It stands out so well to you.
Exactly. So it's really an inward out process. So the first thing, instead of trying to figure out where you fit in, where your resume fits, do the inner work to define who you're best suited for. Where do you, what do you bring to the table? And then attract that job or that opportunity. And that's the same process for self-employment. I mean, that's the work I do. I help people get really clear on what they bring to the table, their unique, what I refer to as their unique perspective, right? Because business talks a lot about differentiators. For example, customer service. Customer service is not a differentiator. I don't care how good your customer service is, because your competition on the street can match it. Right? Customer service in and of itself is not a differentiator. What's a true differentiator is your unique perspective on why you do what you do. Right? Because hardly any of us are in any kind of profession or business that we're alone in. So competition's all over. The only thing that separates you is that how you see what you do differently than anybody else.
Very
So the
true.
work to be done is to define what builds up your perspective is your story, your life history, how you've interpreted life events, and it's unmatchable. That's why in a single family you'll have multiple siblings who will look at the exact same life event or family event in a different way
Oh, so
because
true.
right because it's the perspective we bring to it. There's something you if you can define that, I guarantee you there's something really unique about what you do and what you bring to the table that's probably marketable and will make you stand out. I mean, as a speaker, I play off the fact that I'm a 37-year portrait photographer for affluent families. That makes me a unique speaker because I teach business. I use a lot of photography metaphors. I talk
Oh,
about
sure.
looking at business through a different lens. I talk about how my core skill set is I'm really good at seeing things in pieces and imagining it composed as a whole because that's what a photographer does. I That gives me a leg up as a speaker because I actually don't know of another photographer
Mm.
on the speaking circuit who's talking about business. So the more I can use that, leverage that, the more it separates me from everybody else.
And I can chime in and give personal experience here. When I go back to the first kind of ideas and inklings that, Chase, I don't know, this 9 to 5, like I loved my job. I always say that I loved what I did, but it was just that the business aspect, it was that environment that was kind of pulling that passion out of me. And so when I hired my first official coach and mentor, I hired her because, well, she had been in my community and been in and out of my life for many, many years. I had a know, like, and trust. But what I hired her specifically for originally was because she had done so much of what I thought that I wanted to do in terms of, my world, my profession is health and wellness. And she had done it, sold it, flipped it, moved on to the next thing. And I thought I was hiring her for the strategy, for the secret sauce when it comes to how to be an entrepreneur, how to start a business. But the work that we did, Jeffrey, is so spot on to what you're talking about. And it sounds like what you do. And it was, well, who am I? What are the problems that I see in the world that I want to fix? What is my unique story? What are my limiting beliefs? What are my skill sets? What are my different lenses through which I view the world? And how can I then take that once I get clarity and solidify who I am, the personal aspect? How can I then apply that to the professional side of things? And it blew my mind, honestly. It kind of caught me off guard a little bit because I was like, wait, are you sure this is what we're supposed to be doing? But looking back, I know that was the work, the most crucial and most necessary work. So when you're going through this with somebody, is there that friction? Do people kind of question, hey, am I supposed to be working on myself instead of, my resume or what I can build as a business?
There easily could be. However, because of the work that I do and how the brand messaging I put out, I only attract my ideal clients. And my
Okay.
ideal clients, and this is the work I like to do for others. My ideal clients aren't hardcore business minded, that they don't believe in needing to do the personal development work.
Okay. I see.
Right. So I just flat out, I mean, I don't come across it. Thankfully, I don't get it because I don't attract it. But I also, that's a client I would choose not to work with. I mean,
Mm.
somebody who's so give me the strategy, give me the strategy. I was like, but you don't understand. Yeah, I could give you tons of strategies. That's why the format of my book is unique, The Self-Employed Life, because it's what I present in that book is the self-employed ecosystem, which is a 3-element system of personal development, business strategies, and daily habits that create consistent mindsets. Now, it is meaty as hell with business strategies because I have a lot to say about how self-employed and small business owners, how they can market themselves differently. I have a lot to say about that. The but I was very clear that I'm not going to give away that information until I first change the person. And that's why the
Mm.
book starts off with personal
Amazing.
development. And it's about a third of the book is the first third of the book is personal development, which is, of course, the work that people love to do when you get in there. Because otherwise, I'm just a contributor to the biggest problem,
Mm.
which is so many people just constantly applying action. And every new social media comes out and every new person you hear, so you keep applying action and wondering why you're not getting ahead.
Mm.
The reason for that is that if you don't do the personal development, you're not increasing your capacity for all your hard work to fit into. And I look at personal development as a capacity. Every time I want my business to expand or that of my client, I first turn to the inner work. What do I need to do to believe that I'm capable of more? What's the work I need to do to step into the next level of what I believe I deserve? Because we all put a ceiling on what we think we deserve. How do I bust through that ceiling and know with certainty I deserve even more? I'm capable of more. That's the work you have to like. You have to raise that ceiling and bust open all that container to increase the capacity, so that when you're putting all that work in, it's going somewhere. Otherwise, we just keep hitting against the wall, hitting against the proverbial glass ceiling. And that's why, to me, personal development is an essential part of business growth. And to your point, like I said, I make that very clear. That's my process, and I only work with clients that understand and respect that process.
Since you began the book and it came out, the world has gone through a lot of change.
Mhm.
Uh, First ever global pandemic. I'm pretty sure you weren't predicting this when you were writing your book.
No, I was not.
So I'm curious, since writing it and since putting it out and then now applying it and seeing people apply it through the lens of personal development, have you seen any interesting changes? Have you seen the world of personal development, particularly in how you want people to apply it for the self-employed life? Has anything new or unique risen to the top this last year since the pandemic, or maybe a revisitation of something that, was maybe lower on the totem pole of personal development and now is much more needed? Does that make sense?
It does. And it's a fantastic question, because I think there's a lot of things that rose to the totem pole. I mean, people are looking at everything in their lives so differently. I mean, why is there such a employee shortage, right? Because people got a taste of the life they want to live and don't want to go back to the life that they had. You
Ain't
know,
that
I'm
the
a, I'm
truth?
I'm a professional speaker, and I've always I've always controlled, I've always, to your point about ever forward, right?
Mm.
I've always focused on how I've made every business decision based on first on how I wanted to live. All right. So I've always kept a pretty tight control on what my business looked like so that I could live the life that I chose to live at that point. Now, I'm not
Mm.
talking about balance, because work-life balance is a fallacy. To me, your life is in balance if you're empowered with the choice. I work more now than I did probably 30 years ago.
It's
Reason
a
is I had little kids.
entrepreneurs are the only people that'll work 80 hours for
Yeah.
themselves so they don't have to work 40 for
Yeah.
somebody else, right? Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I can choose to work 24/7 if I choose to, because I'm not beholden to a family anymore. Like, I've raised my kids; they're out of the home. I live with my partner in Miami, and I can make the choices to work when I choose. So I actually, because I love the work I'm doing, I'm passionate about this work. I'm working more now than I did 30 years ago, but it doesn't feel off balance to me because it's empowered with my choice. So I think one of the differences is that people are actually stepping into self-care, reevaluating their lives, designing the life of their choice. On a more global level, if you will. Again, having been in business as long as I've been, in 37 years, I've been through 9/11, the Great Recession, now this one. Like I said, this was like my third rodeo. Every time there's a major upheaval, the upside is, and believe me, I'm fully aware of the trauma and the loss and the difficulty so many people went through. But the upside is that we keep deepening our humanity. Every crisis deepens our humanity. That's why I believe there's a call for businesses to be more human now than ever, to be more empathetic, to be more understand, to broaden their acceptance of everybody, of all different people, right? Of different beliefs and races. And
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
constantly called to deepen our, and this crisis, I think, probably even more so than 9/11 and the recession, this crisis seemed to do that more.
This was
This
global.
crisis,
Yeah. It
this was
affected every
global.
human. Yeah.
It really did. And that's, you're absolutely right. And there's a way in which I think we've really deepened our humanity through this. And I think because of that, we as consumers are going to demand that the people we do business with are more human as well. So business on both sides, like I said, there's always, I'm an eternal optimist, but I look at all the shifts and think, there's a real beautiful humanity that's going on here. People are demanding that they are able to work at home, if not all the time, but partly because they want to live their lives. They want to be there for their family members. So there's a real deepening of humanity that I'm loving. And I think businesses, employers, everybody's going to have to adjust in order for this to all fit. But I think we're going to end up with a really, really incredible life experience. I think it's not going to be all work, and we're going to work a little bit more at our own pace. The interesting thing is, I guess another part to your answer to your question is one of the biggest changes I see is also a result of after the book was out. I had told my speaking rep when I wrote the book that let's focus on getting speaking gigs at associations, because what corporation is going to hire me to talk about self-employment, right? So,
True. Okay. Yeah.
but here's the
Yeah.
thing, Chase, like once the book was out, companies and people on LinkedIn started really being attracted to this content. Here's what I realized. I realized that the best employees of the future are self-employed minds. They have a self-employed mindset about them.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
way in which and I think that's just the way the workforce is going to look. People are going to demand that they have the autonomy of a self-employed person. They want to work for a company with the same sense of mission. I believe a lot of people really want to care about the company they work for as if it
Sure.
was their own.
I agree.
There are a lot of people who just don't want the hassle of owning a business.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a shift, a major shift in the workforce that I'm really curious to see how many companies step up and redesign the workforce to accommodate that value shift. I think it's going to be necessary. They're just simply not going to get workers.
I agree. And, it kind of takes me back to that initial struggle that I was feeling with my last job. And like I said earlier in the interview, I absolutely loved my job. I loved what I did. I loved the people that I served. I love the patients, the clients that I worked with. I loved the team that I managed. But it was just everything else that wasn't
Right.
clicking, And I really do believe that maybe if there was more of this kind of self-employed application, self-employed and autonomous mindset that was able to successfully be woven into the fabric and culture of that organization, then who knows? I very well could still be there. I had no problem staying there, and I don't think there's anything wrong. As much as I love being self-employed and doing my own thing now, I do not think there's anything wrong with anybody working for other people, as long as this personal side and the fulfilling side and this autonomous side and this everything side is taken care of alongside with the mission of this other company. I mean, there are great missions, great companies out there that need the support of people, but it's just, what are we doing to the people along the way that can be corrected?
Yeah, 100%. I think, so what do I think the world is going to look like in the future? I actually think it's going to look, whether you have a traditional job or not, I think it's all going to look pretty self-employed.
Uh,
I just think as humans, we're going to demand it. And I truly believe you get the best of people when you give them autonomy. When you give
mhm.
them, self-fulfillment, self-realization. If you allow people to tap into that, there's a really basic, and I know this may sound incredibly naive, but I truly think a huge percentage of the world's problems could be solved if we just actually believe that people are basically good humans. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
basically good humans. It doesn't take definition, be it by religion or what have you. People fundamentally want to be good humans. And if we leaned into that and trusted people, and if employers trusted their employees and gave them an opportunity to be on a journey of self-realization, in that journey, people want to do their best. They want to be good humans. So
Mm.
I think we should be encouraging that in life, and we'll get much better results.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Jeff, you also bring something unique to the table in that you have been a creative for so many years. You've been a creative, I think, before maybe technically that term, applied. You've been a
Yeah.
photographer. You have been quite literally capturing moments in life, in people's lives, in nature, and just helping translate an experience into a tangible thing. How have you kind of seen the creative space transition over the last several years, over the last couple of decades? Do you think that it's just been finally now creatives are in a time on earth and in history where it's more accepted and you actually can make a living out of it? Can you kind of maybe walk us through your experience as a creative and like why you think that this is such a great place to be in?
Yeah, it's again another interesting question because I'll explain by means of telling the story of my podcast, if you will. So I started my
Please.
podcast in 2014. It's actually July, so I'm just coming on
Oh,
seven
wow.
years.
You're way ahead of me. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 7 years ago, we're just coming on 700 episodes. So we've, on the
Wow.
average, put out 100 episodes a year. And I started the show. Started out being called Creative Warriors. Okay,
No
so
way.
yeah,
Wow.
it was called Creative Warriors because I really, having been in the creative space my entire life up to that point, I wanted to support creatives in business. And I felt like it takes the spirit of a warrior to be a creative in business because it was such a hard road. Once after the show, a couple of years into the show, I, to your point, I started recognizing a little bit of an expansion, right? It wasn't, the world was broadening in that there were a lot of people that were in business, but I felt really craving a way to be in business differently. And I started seeing this as a speaker. This is about the time I started speaking and being in front of stages, in front of audiences on stages, and people coming up to me. And it's like, wow, there's a genuine craving for people to want to be unleashed and be in business in a different way. Like they're creeped out by typical sales techniques. They're creeped out by, and I was hearing this over and over again. So we broadened the show. We kept the name of Creative Warriors to broaden it. But instead of referring to it as a show for creatives in business, we started referring to it as people that needed creative solutions in business. All
Aha.
right.
Okay.
So it started, so the creative person to me started broadening. It wasn't just the traditional creatives. It was now people that wanted to be in business in a different way. And we sailed that way for quite a number of years. And we're just coming, I guess, on just about 2 years ago, we rebranded the podcast again, complete rebrand to called The Self-Employed Life.
Mm.
Because now once I broadened it, now I want to hone in, right? So what I think has happened with the creatives in business, first of all, I think fundamentally everybody's creative. I had one of my coaching clients, super smart, analytical minded guy he referred to himself as a data architect, basically who's just a really
Oh,
fancy
interesting.
yeah, he basically was just a really fancy programmer.
Yeah.
But his brain, data architects suited him because he would start from nothing and create custom programs. Swore to me that didn't have a creative bone in his body. I'm like, how can you not?
Yeah. How can you not?
Right? How
How
can
can you not
I
see that?
mean? He literally takes companies' problems, like big companies, and he takes their problems and creates a solution through software. Like, so the software may be logical, but you're creatively
Mm,
solving huge production problems. And the solution is, so it's amazing to me. We refuse to identify as creative.
mm.
But how could you not be? So to me,
Yeah.
the whole idea of creativity has broadened in my lifetime. It has broadened so much from being pigeonholed as a creative person to living creatively, like living by your life by design, creating the life you want. So I just think I no longer see it as a narrow, niche of type of person or a type of
Mm.
business, but now I see it as I think the word creative and design is much more. I think they overlap a lot more, and it's just being creative to design the lives we want.
That's so well said. And I think that's a really unique perspective for the listener. Maybe they've never thought of themselves as a creative. I don't think creatively. I don't create anything out of the norm. I'm just a punch in, punch out. I went to school. I have this skill set. I do, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, you may be used to this kind of formality. You may be used to this kind of, you know, infrastructure. But now more than ever, like you've been talking about, Jeff, now is the time in our history to apply that in a very creative way. And so I think this is where we're seeing dissolving a little bit of the old formal, this is my job, this is my role, this is what I do, into just, everybody putting on that creative lens and just seeing, well, where can I apply this in a way that's never been applied before? And in a way that is going to also suit me along the way, as well as it's suiting this other organization, or creating my own. I think now is the time for creativity to be seeping into every nook and cranny in everybody's life, especially when it comes to what they do for a living.
Yeah, Lord knows we need creative solutions to life's problems and the world's problems.
Seriously.
And, I think another way that creativity, as we have thought of it in the past, I think another way in which it's broadened. We joke a lot about how, the kids that were the geeks in high school are now the richest ones on the planet.
Running Google
And
and everything. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but I think the same, there's this undercurrent that there's something creatives have known all along that I think people are now experiencing.
What's that?
And that is what it feels like to be an outcast.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Interesting.
So creatives, I mean, I have taken numerous polls, amongst, especially when I had a broader traditional creative audience for the podcast Creative Warriors, I'd ask how many people felt like the black sheep of their family. Every hand goes up. Right. Because that is the experience. It's one of the reasons, another interesting dynamic here, Chase, is that a tremendous number of professional speakers on the biggest of stages identify as being introverted. You wouldn't think so, but, and I'm one of them. Like, I consider myself basically an introvert. But
most of the biggest creatives I know that are quote on, podcast, video, YouTube, whatever, huge introverts.
Right. And one of the reasons, I think there's several reasons why that is, but I think one of the reasons is because we're actually really good at managing uncomfortable situations. We're used to it, right? When you're an introvert and you are a creative that's used to feeling like a black sheep, you've actually learned a really wonderful skill set. This, again, could go right back to your unique perspective. You've gained a really unique ability to manage uncomfortable situations and break through it. And what I think another way in which I think the creative person is expanding so broadly in the world is that we're so much more inclusive, right? Society is really focused on, we still have a lot of work to do, but there's work being done. So we're going forward, still a lot of work to do, but we're moving forward on being more inclusive. I actually was just going to post something on Facebook. I haven't yet, but I just thought it was kind of ironic because on my podcast, one of my biggest challenges has been for years is that we have far more men than women. And I've been encouraging women for years to speak up, be louder, because the men are just plowing right through. And I became, as many of us did, far more conscious of that a couple of years ago because I wanted a little bit more of an even show. Amazing. As it turns out, I was just before hopping on with you, I was sitting down with our broadcast schedule. I was like scratching my head thinking, oh my gosh, I've got 7 women in a row. Like, wow. It's flipped the other way now. Like, I need to get I need to get some dudes interjected. I had to move the schedule around to like break it up, right? Because we've made a very conscious effort to be more inclusive. And I think that is happening all around. And I think there's a way in which creatives, as I said, there's that element of making sure we're included, being able to manage when we're not. There's something the creative person has known all along about that I think now society is having to hear them. And I think it's a fantastic change for the better.
That's such a unique perspective and a very true one. As you're walking us through that, yes, I'm just thinking back to the last 6 months, the last year, hell, the last 15 months now of just how the world in many positive ways, I think, has been completely flipped on its head for inclusion, for diversity, for every and all walk of life to be a part of the walk of life. And especially when it comes to the professional aspect. So I could not agree more. Absolutely. Yeah. I want to get to kind of the problem solving now. I know that's a big part of what you do, and you were talking about it as the second component in your book. What are some of the key problem solving approaches here that you provide, and that people should be really keeping in mind when it comes to thinking creatively or the self-employed life.
Yeah, I think, and I'm interpreting your question to mean specific because I referred to it earlier, like kind of like business strategies. Like,
Yes. Yeah. What are
so,
some of these tactics?
right. So, again, I tend to flip things upside down. My previous book, which was called Lingo, when I first started doing a lot of podcasts, people would describe the book as being a bit disruptive. And I'm like, I am not cool enough to be disruptive. Like, I don't think of myself as a disruptive person, but I think my creative nature and just being an introvert and an observer, I think, I've just been looking at life for, so long, and you just realize, like I said earlier, so much of life is backwards. And this definitely plays out in business, particularly when you're a small business or a self-employed business or a business of one, is that the problem is, one of the core problems is most business strategies don't fit us. They don't feel right, and it's what I refer to as being right sized. So my approach to business and what I teach in my book are very specific marketing and business strategies that are right sized, and right, you can even say right sized up, for
Yeah.
small businesses. And one of those tactics, I'll get specific. One of those tactics that people are loving is what I call hug marketing. This is me turning the world of marketing funnels upside down, because I know for myself, and I know from years of doing this work, your typical self-employed or business of one kind of is creeped out by the idea of marketing funnel, right? We know what it is. We know to follow its protocol to get clients,
Yeah.
but energetically, it's always creeped me out. I'm like, there's something about this that I just don't like, because if you think about it visually, the idea of a funnel is that it's very wide and welcoming at the top, but then we're taking people through this process of narrowing them down, and kind of squeezing them through this small hole at the bottom, right? And marketing is full of bad words like tripwire. Like, in our marketing funnel, we'll have a tripwire. Like,
It
we've
just sounds
referred to
icky. It
it
sounds
sounds
wrong.
awful. And we
Yeah.
talk about like target clients, like we're going to shoot an arrow at them. And it's the energy of marketing words are so disturbing to me that I had to turn that upside down and I think we all need to turn it upside down to match the energy of what people want to receive. And this is what's critical.
Okay.
I'll even say it this way. Probably the biggest, not even probably, I'll say the absolute biggest shift that I've seen in business in my 37 years is people make an energetic decision about who they do business with today more than any other time I've ever seen. They primarily decide whether they want to do business with you based on whether they think you get them and whether they like you. It wasn't that way in the 80s and 90s, right? I can guarantee, as a photographer for affluent families, I used to go into these big mansions and beautiful homes, and they had professional decorators. And I would hear these families, very highly educated families, complaining about their designer being a diva, he or she, right? But they were the name to have. They were the person. And honestly, as a photographer, I was one of those people too. I was never a diva, I don't think, but I built a business on being like the go-to photographer for affluent people, because it meant something to have my name on your photographs. Sure. I'll be honest with you. Like, that was a brand I built. And that's why I had an 8-week waiting list. Like, for 15 years, I had an 8-week waiting list, because I was like, people wanted my name on their portraits, on their holiday cards. It meant something to them.
Yeah.
Try getting away with that today. There's no way. Right? Being an awful person to do business with, or even just think about how, I don't know if you have this for yourself, but there are brands that I won't support because I know where their money goes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And vice versa. Like I've found the story of a brand to be so just heart melting that I was like, you have a customer for life. Like, the product's good, but like, your story is better, and I'm sold. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there are businesses. This is what I think is so intriguing about this, is that there are businesses we will do business with, and businesses we won't do business with because their values are aligned or misaligned.
Yes.
But there's also a respect for just having a position. I don't know. Are you familiar with the company Penzeys Spices?
No.
Okay.
So name doesn't ring a bell.
They're the largest spice distributor, at least in the US.
Okay.
At least, I mean, they're a huge business. Bill Penzi is the founder and CEO of the company, and he's the most politically vocal person you will probably ever meet. Like,
Really?
no holds barred. It doesn't matter what side he's on, but I'll tell you, this guy will say anything. And has actually, and it's, which is what that has always been rule number one in business. You don't mix politics and business, right? This, his business has grown exponentially. And I truly believe it can't be just people that agree with him. It has to also be people that respect him for taking a stance. And I feel the same way. It's like, you know what?
For
I'm not
speaking
really
his truth.
for speaking his truth.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, I mean, there's no way, for as much as his business is growing, he's actually probably almost as well known as a leader speaking his mind as he is for his product. Like he's
Wow.
extremely well known in the business world as someone who just will say anything because he really believes being in a business comes with a burden of responsibility for standing for something and knowing, you know, and letting your buyers know where their money is going, what their money is supporting, what type of person, what type of employees, what type of mission that their money is supporting. And I have to believe it's more than people that just agree with them. It has to just be people that respect that. So I think without a doubt, the biggest shift in business I've seen in 37 years is that people no longer hire you because you're the best at what you do. They hire you because they feel like you get them.
Mm.
And it's the human connection of it that I think, you know, really matters the most. So I think as businesses, we need to step into that even more.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I thought it was just me being in LA here and the LA rubbing off, but it sounds like it's all over, you know, it's the vibe. It's how you feel around somebody that I think solidifies your decision now more than ever to not only want to be in their life, but to support their business and
Right.
try to create with them.
Yeah. Oh, there's absolutely, I mean, I'm very careful to the best I can be. I'm careful about where my money goes so that I'm supporting things that are aligned. You know, and this is why this is why, back to your question, like unique strategies. This is why I introduced this idea of hug marketing, because I said, it flips the idea of marketing funnel upside down, that instead of the goal being, how do I appear to be loving and broad and open-minded at the top, only to squeeze people through a goal or to meet my objectives. Hug marketing, and it's a visual in the book, which is a series of concentric circles. So instead of looking at it as a funnel, if you look at it as a series of concentric circles, one inside of another, the burden of responsibility for the business is to understand that people are starting on the outer circles, right? What I refer to as lurkers, right? They're people that follow you on social media. You don't know them by name. They're just lurking, right? They're out there. And it's our burden of responsibility to compel them to take the next step, which is to become curious, right? And
come closer.
Correct.
Yeah.
And once they become curious, maybe at that point they start engaging with your content, right? So then they become engaged, and then they're likely to the next step in is they would become connected. That's probably when they're going to opt into your list, right? So now there's a surrender element at the connected part,
Very
right?
true.
But you need to respect, as a business, you need to respect that nothing is free to the consumer because they're surrendering their email. The goal then, of course, is to then become a customer, but we don't want to stop there. And that tends to be the end game for so many businesses. The next step is the hug, right? Because what you want to do is you want to create such a relationship with your customers that they not only become your repeat customers, your loyal customers, they also become your biggest advocates. They're the customers that if you saw them in person, you couldn't imagine not giving them a hug.
Oh, so true. Yeah.
Right? So now we have this whole different vibe around marketing that actually fits the small business owner so much better, because they feel good about who they are as people when they think about marketing as a goal towards a hug, not squeezing people into a marketing funnel. So that's just one example. There's strategy after strategy in the book. It is chock full of marketing strategies that are really looked at from a different perspective. Someone like myself, which, we didn't touch on this, but I'm probably I'm a rare individual in that I've never had a traditional job. I have literally been self-employed
That's
since the
right.
age of
That's
14.
right. Yeah.
I've never received a paycheck from anybody. So what I teach and what I write about is the real deal. Like
It's your
this
truth,
is
your life.
it's all I know. I mean, God, I think it's so ridiculous now because it was in 2000 and I was doing my coach training, I think in 2008. And there were a lot of corporate people in this coach training, and they're all talking about C-suite this and C-suite that. And I had no idea what the term C-suite meant. I mean, this is, 2008 seems like a long time ago, but I was a very mature adult. I'm
Uh,
57 now. So even, at that point, I was a very mature
wow.
adult, you know, and I had to ask somebody, what does C-suite mean? And of course they explained it's, CEO, CMO, CFO, somebody with a C in their title, you know, but
Bossy
I
pants.
didn't, right. But that's how self-employed I am, right? I'm so self-employed that I actually don't know a lot of that corporate jargon because it's never been in my world. And most of the time I hear it, I'm like, that's absolutely useless information. you know, self-employment
Wow.
to me is just so real. It's like, this is the real deal. Like this, you're in it and you're living your life and you're designing your life. And yes, you are creative
Mm.
because you're probably, even if you've bought a business, like you're making something from nothing. Like that's amazing.
Well, listen or take note. If you've ever wondered who to listen to, what resource to dive into when it comes to the self-employed life, when it comes to life on the other side of your corporate, or just the mentality that you can develop, the self-employed mentality that you can develop and apply to your career, why not take it from somebody who has known literally nothing else but the thing you're seeking? That's incredible.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Jeffrey, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation here today. And I think, honestly, you've given me so many things to just think about. I love this hug marketing approach. And I think that's an important concept for the listener as well, because I go back again, not to keep making this about me, but just, as a relation point, and to the person listening, that's probably maybe one of your initial or biggest like icky points is
hmm
like, maybe I love what I do, but it's just the business, the culture, everything around it. I feel so disconnected. I
Yeah.
feel anything other than like warm and fuzzy and in a hug mentality for the people that I'm here to serve. And I think for a lot of people wanting to get out of that environment or out of that job into another one or into one of their own, that's really one of the things they're probably after the most is, how do
Yeah.
I get and just get connected to the person that I want to serve, that I know I can serve the most, so that it doesn't feel like such a big disconnect. It doesn't feel like
Yeah.
this cold cut off culture, but rather we can get back into like, yeah, I'm going to serve you. I have a product, I have a service, and I'm going to live my best life doing it. But like, we should want and feel like we have this kind of hug mentality, and there's this value exchange going on simultaneously.
Yeah. I think the whole, if the goal in business is to be know, liked, and trust, you're not trying hard enough.
Oh, damn. Well, well, Jeffrey, I'm going to have all of your information down on the show notes for everybody to check out. You've got to get his book. And it's been so valuable to have you here. And I think your work is coming at the most necessary time it could have. You didn't predict the pandemic or all these changes,
Mm.
but wow, I'm sure it's so applicable now.
Yeah, I think so. It's I can name I have a long list of times in life when my timing was off. I think I may have
Likewise.
gotten this. I think I may have gotten this right.
Well, I have to ask then, kind of hearing your expertise and the truth that you've been living your entire life, how can it be applied to our theme over here at Everforward Radio? Living a life ever forward is just bringing attention and awareness to these little key areas of our life or our life overall that show us the next step, that can help us take a step towards the direction of, wanting to give ourselves a hug, but also to create a life and create a business where we can just get back to feeling good and serving others along the way. So I'm curious, what does that mean to you, Jeffrey? How do you live a life ever forward?
I think, and that's that. The beautiful thing is, I believe life is ever forward now. I think we need to retire the word retire, right? Because we have these weird, definition. We have these weird defining moments. Whatever retirement means to you, fine. If retirement to you means golfing, that's great. It certainly doesn't to me. Retirement to me, it doesn't mean stop doing what I love. It just it'll just take a different form. I'm thinking I plan on writing a lot of books. I'm thinking someday I can just live on the royalties, right? So, and I actually recently did this work. As we've learned, I always do the inner work first, and really looked at, like, what does retirement look to me? Like, what's the difference? And I think the difference for me is retirement means, for me, keep doing the work that I love to do, but probably not under the demands of somebody else's schedule or the schedule of having to serve clients, or even probably having to pursue clients. That instead I can put content out that has monetary value and the money comes in. But I don't plan on stopping. So to me, life, the way society and life has shifted, is that it is ever forward. I don't think we have to live our lives under this false notion that there's some stopping point, be it retirement, or yes, there's a stopping point of death, but let's live our fullest up to then. And I think that's so important right now, because again, I devote a whole chapter to it in the book, which I refer to as midlife self-employed people, because we have so many people, they're 50s, 60s, and 70s, that are just now stepping into their most purposeful work. They're the ones that are leaving corporate world in droves. Maybe they've even put in their 30 years and they technically retired from their corporate job, but now they're passionate about this thing that they're doing in the world. They are absolutely moving ever forward. One of my favorite podcast guests was a gentleman named Chip Conley. Chip wrote a book called Wisdom at Work, the making of the modern elder. So, but the point he made about midlife was so well taken. He said, the fact of the matter is that the fact that the lifespan is increased and life expectancy is longer, it's not that we're old longer. It's that we're in midlife longer. We're still only old the last 10 years, right?
Yeah, very
But we
true.
have this, right? But we have this much broader span of time, which we can move ever forward. And I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people live their lives right now in a way that I'm going to live my life ever forward until it stops.
With things in motion, stay in motion. Is that the law of physics?
Right.
I'm probably
Yeah.
butchering that, but I mean, it applies to us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just stay in motion until, until the big wheel stops turning, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I still challenge I have 3 kids in their 20s. I still challenge them to keep up with me. They can outrun me, but not in life stamina. I can probably still do them under. Like, I just don't stop.
That's the goal. That's amazing. So
Absolutely.
Jeffrey, it's been a pleasure having you on the show here. And again, all of his information in his book is going to be down in the show notes for everybody to check out. I would encourage you to do so. And what a conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Beautiful.